Lord of Mystery, The Return of the Stars Chapter 31-40. Taking advantage of the absence of Vice Dean Bad, Shu began to use her professional ability. Did you really pick up this string of bells from outside? Shu's indifferent tone carried a majesty that would not tolerate rejection or lying. She was using her extraordinary ability as an arbitrator. Amy replied timidly, "Yes, I picked it up at the foot of the mountain a month ago, and many people can prove it for me." "What do you think of Dean Dane?" "Very bad, he often doesn't give us food, and always threatens to lock us up in the underground confinement room." "What about Vice Dean Bad?" "Dean Bad is a good person, he is very good to us and always takes good care of us." "Is there anyone in the poorhouse who is weird on weekdays?" Amy thought for a while and said, "Dean Dane, he likes to dream." Shu became interested. What kind of dreams does Dean Dane like to have? Asta, who finally got to hear the follow-up of this question, also became serious. "He always dreams of digging a hole in the soil and planting gold coins, and then it will grow into a golden tree full of gold coins." Shu and Asta were stunned by this answer. They had also dreamed of this dream of getting rich. When he wakes up in the morning, he will be angry because the golden tree suddenly disappears. He will curse us loudly as thieves who stole his gold coins. Amy added. Shu's face was strange. She thought she could see something unusual from Dean's dream, but this was just a dream fantasy of an extremely greedy person. There was nothing suspicious about it. Asta pondered for a while and said, "Did Dean Dane ever dream of burying a child in the soil?" Lecturer Folan's face changed slightly, and he looked at Asta in shock. He remembered that his teacher had said before that the poorhouse had buried children in the soil many times. Shu also opened his eyes slightly and listened more seriously. "I just remember that he once shouted angrily that thieves who stole gold coins should be buried in the ground so that his golden tree could produce more gold coins." Did Dean really say that? Hugh had a bad guess in his heart. Well, many people heard it. We also laughed privately that only a greedy person like him could grow a golden tree full of gold coins if he was buried in the ground. Amy's tone was very sure. Hugh walked to Hasta and asked quietly, "Did Dean really do such a cruel thing?" "It's just possible. It's so hateful. How could he not let go of even the children?" Hugh clenched his fists in anger, and was even more annoyed that he didn't take good care of Dean Don at the time, but let him run away instead. Asta restrained his anger and asked calmly, "How is the relationship between Dean Dan and Vice Dean Bad on weekdays?" Amy lowered her head and thought for a long time before whispering, "Dean Dan has said many times that he wants to fire Vice Dean Bad. Once when he was very angry, he even said that he would lock Vice Dean Bad in the confinement room forever and make him a prisoner for life." What was Dean Dan angry about that time? I don't know. I just remember that Dean Dan had a bad temper that day and many people were punished by him. When Asta was about to continue asking, Vice Dean Bad and the police officer came over with a boy who was obviously half a head taller than Amy. After some questioning, the boy named Simon did steal Amy's bell last night and sneaked out, but he didn't have the courage to scare Aunt Lisa in the end. Instead, he spent the night hiding in the bathroom like Amy tonight. That's good. Shu was obviously relieved, and returned the bells to Amy, warning him not to run around at night, and not to shake the bells at will, so as not to disturb others. The two police officers also gave Amy and Simon a verbal lesson, and then asked Vice Dean Bad to take them back to rest. There seemed to be a misunderstanding tonight, and the two police officers did not stay for long. After Vice Dean Bad sent people back to the dormitory, they left here together. The iron door was locked again, and everything returned to peace. The two police officers and Vice Dean Bad went back to rest, and Asta and the other two went back to his room for a small gathering. "Are you hiding something from me?" Shu frowned, waving the triangular spike in his hand and knocking on the table. "That was told to my teacher by a man named Old Jeff." Lecturer Foran steadily exerted his ability to tell stories. Shu was very angry after hearing this, and said very confidently, "Do you still need to doubt it? Old Jeff must have discovered Dean's crime and was murdered by him." Asta tacitly agreed with Shu's inference. It is basically confirmed that Old Jeff was murdered, but even if the murderer was Dean Dan, he would at least need a helper, right? With Dean Dan's greedy character, he would definitely not deal with Old Jeff himself. There must be subordinates working for him in the workhouse. Although today's search confirmed Dean Dan's various crimes, it did not find the accomplices who helped Dean Dan commit the crime. This is a hidden danger after all. Asta thought about it and told Hugh his thoughts. Hugh promised, I am also very professional in interrogation. Everything is bounded by the law, don't resort to violence casually. Asta felt that he needed to remind Hugh. Where am I violent? I just use more direct means sometimes. Zio's cheeks flushed slightly, and she was obviously not confident enough. For the sake of our acquaintance, if you go to the police station for this kind of thing next time, you can ask me for help. Zio was very dissatisfied with Asta's words, and said bluntly, looking for you. With you, a poor baron. I am also a lawyer, I am now the legal advisor of Bavart Bank. Shu was silent, and then whispered, is Bavart Bank very rich? Not very rich, but very rich. Alas, it's a pity that I don't have the ability to rob a bank, I can only earn some hard-earned money by selling hard labor. Shu sighed, suddenly felt bored, waved his hand, and had no interest in continuing the conversation. Lecturer Foreign also left with her. Sometimes I want to rob a bank. Asta also sighed, but he was just thinking about it, just like Dean Dane dreamed of planting gold coins and growing golden trees in his sleep. After locking the door, Asta went back to bed and lay down, thinking about tomorrow's affairs. Whether there is news from Professor Wayne tomorrow or not, he has to go back home first. He has not taken a bath or changed clothes for 2 days, which makes it difficult for him to fall asleep. Regarding the doubts that still exist in the workhouse, let's wait and see when we find Dean Dan. Maybe I just think too much, and Dean Dan is the culprit of everything. As for the different sounds of the bells on the 2 nights, it may be because different people have different powers, and the sounds made by shaking the bells are also different. Asta thought a lot, and soon fell asleep, and chose to come to the Hall of Stars. Now he has gradually become familiar with and mastered the Hall of Stars, and can decide whether to enter the Hall of Stars after falling asleep. Recently, there are a lot of troubles. Asta closed his eyes and sat quietly in the chair for a long time before looking at the star belonging to the lamp god. His eyes zoomed in, and the starlight dissipated. The shadow of the magic lamp still flickered with a dim light, very quiet and peaceful. Asta stared at it for a long time before driving the chain of order to whip it as usual. After diverting his worries, he felt much more relaxed. Early the next morning, Lecturer Foreign came and knocked on the door again. Asta, who had finally taken a nap, was woken up. He got up and tidied his clothes before slowly opening the door. If Lecturer Foreign disturbed his sleep for some trivial matters, he would not mind letting Lecturer Foreign feel what cruelty was. Fortunately, the news brought by Lecturer Foreign was shocking and a great joy. Professor Wayne was found. It is said that at 2 or 3 o'clock last night, Professor Wayne returned to his house and was soon discovered by the police officers who were closely watching the area. Then the news came to the dock area early in the morning, and Lecturer Foreign was the first to inform him after receiving the news. Asta said with a bad face, did Professor Wayne walk back by himself? That's what they said. Haha, how lucky. Asta's face became more and more unfriendly. He was just suspicious before, but now he can be sure that this disappearance was directed and acted by Professor Wayne himself. He didn't care that Professor Wayne replaced his role. What made him angry was that Professor Wayne didn't tell him in advance, causing him to worry about it. Lecturer Foreign coughed lightly and said, well, I don't think the teacher did it on purpose. Maybe he was just in a hurry to leave and didn't have time to say goodbye to us. Lecturer Foreign, while you were eating white bread and anxiously unable to fall asleep, Professor Wayne must have been alone, drinking a little wine silently, and spending a very sad night with roasted sausages. Based on Asta's description alone, Lecturer Foreign felt his anger rising instantly. I was so angry all of a sudden. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. After successfully making Lecturer Foolin angry, Hasta consoled him, maybe it's as you said, Professor Wayne just didn't say goodbye to us because he didn't have enough time. Lecturer Foolin didn't answer. The two chatted at the door for a while, and Zio also opened the door and came over. I heard that Professor Wayne has been found. Yes, thank you Ms. Zio for your help along the way. Lecturer Foulin recovered from his angry state of mind. Well, although I didn't rescue Professor Wayne personally, the necessary hiring expenses cannot be less. £20, this is a reasonable price. Asta gave a quite appropriate reward. Okay. Zio had no objection. After all, this was 10 gold pounds more than he expected. Hasta took out two 10 gold pound notes and handed them to Hugh. He had to find a way to reimburse Professor Wayne for the money. Lecturer Foulin also had the same idea, and he gave Hasta an "I support you" expression. After getting the reward he deserved, Zio didn't wait long and rushed towards the basement. In order to find out the secret passage in the basement, the police officers decided to use gunpowder to blow up the lounge and prepare to do it later. Hasta had no intention of joining in the fun. Now that Professor Wayne was safe, he did not want to stay in the workhouse anymore. Lecturer Foulin had the same idea as him, and the two of them simply freshened up and left the workhouse. Boom, boom, thick smoke filled the air, and the secret passage lounge was blown open. In addition to rubble, a hidden room separated by a stone door was also revealed. Inside, Dean Dan was dead, with his hands holding a wooden box filled with gold coins. When Hasta finally returned home, the first thing he did was take a comfortable bath. The sticky feeling is really uncomfortable. Fortunately, the weather is not too hot, otherwise I would definitely smell the sour smell of sweat. After taking a bath and enjoying a carefully prepared dessert, Hasta felt like he was alive again. Lord Baron, Lord Greco has sent an invitation to invite you to tonight's banquet. Butler Neil came over at the most appropriate time to report the matter. Well, I'll be there on time. You'd better write a handwritten reply to show your expectation and importance for this banquet. Okay, I have to catch up on my sleep later, wake me up again during lunch. I obey your instructions. Hasta got up and returned to the bedroom. He missed the big bed and soft quilt after 2 days of absence. Only a few minutes after my head hit the pillow, I fell asleep. East District, Professor Wayne's home. After Lecturer Foulin went home to freshen up, he immediately rushed to his teacher's home. Ah, Foulin, my good student, I'm so afraid I won't be able to see you. Professor Wayne gave Lecturer Foulin a warm hug. Lecturer Foulin's expression was still not very good. Foulin, are you blaming the teacher? Don't dare. Professor Wayne sighed. Well, after I separated from you that night, I happened to pick up a key on the ground that the guard accidentally left behind. This is such a perfect opportunity, how could I miss it? I didn't have time to say goodbye to you and tell you the truth. I quickly left the workhouse under the cover of night. In order not to be discovered, I walked up the mountain deliberately and made a wide circle. I didn't leave the area near the dock area until dawn. In order to prevent the plan from failing, I stayed in the mountain for another day and night. On the second night, I left the mountain overnight and returned to my home. In order to convince Professor Foulin of his words, Professor Wayne took the initiative to roll up his sleeves, revealing his arms that were scratched by vines and branches. Is this really the case? Lecturer Foulin was moved. Of course, God, Foulin, is the teacher so untrustworthy in your eyes now? Lecturer Foulin's anger disappeared. He thought for a moment and then frowned and said, Mr. Asta is not as easy to talk to as I am. For this purpose, I prepared a gift overnight last night. Teacher, where is my gift? Ah, Foulin, have you become so greedy now? Lecturer Foulin gave Professor Wayne a resentful look. He was still too soft-hearted, otherwise he should have had a share of this gift. Hasta arrived at Professor Wayne's house at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and Professor Foulin had already gone back to rest. Professor Wayne said the same thing again, and Hasta listened quietly. Professor Wayne, I have a few questions that I need you to answer for me. Telling everything you know is a good moral character that I have always adhered to. Professor Wayne smiled and invited Hasta to sit down and make him a cup of Earl Grey tea. Did you really make a new decision because you were lucky enough to pick up the key left behind by the guard? No, after I heard you talk about your plan that night, I already made a decision in my mind. You are a promising nobleman and you should not waste your credit on such a thing. How did you hide it from everyone in the workhouse and go up the mountain to hide it overnight? The workhouse patrol arrangements were good, but I had someone I knew who helped me at a critical time. Vice Dean Bard. Well, he's a better candidate than Dane to be the new director of the workhouse. Did you really hide in the mountains for a day and a night? Of course not. I took a detour from the mountain to leave the dock area overnight and spent this time at a friend's house. Asta stopped asking questions, glanced at Professor Wayne, and said in a relaxed tone, "So, what gift have you prepared to compensate for my injured fragile heart? You really deserve to be my student." Professor Wayne stood up with a smile, walked to a bookshelf, and took out a thin contract paper from a book. "This is a deed of your Campbell family." Professor Wayne handed the deed to Asta and said, "Don't show such a strange expression. Your father is a gambler. A lot of property has been exported from him. This is just a small part of it." Asta took the deed and scanned it. This is a deed for a manor dedicated to growing various flowers. Although the area is not large, it is at least worth tens of thousands of gold pounds. The value of 10,000 pounds is not the most important thing. This deed is still the ancestral property of the Campbell family when they started, witnessing the Campbell family from humble beginnings to glory. Voltaire Campbell may have forgotten this past event, but under the guidance of the old butler, he has always kept this history in mind. This gift is too valuable, I can't accept it. This originally belongs to your Campbell family. Since it has been exported, it is no longer considered to be the Campbell family's property. Professor Wayne laughed, took a sip of black tea, and then slowly said, "Because you have a good butler." Asta's heart trembled and said, "Is it arranged by the old butler? He knows that your father is very fond of gambling and will export all his property sooner or later. In order to leave some assets for you, the young master, he has thought of many ways. My relationship with him is pretty good. He asked for my help, and then arranged for me to gamble with your father. I lived up to his expectations and won the deed in one night." Quote. Speaking of which, Voltaire's gambling skills and luck were too bad. "I didn't do anything that night. I just flipped the cards and looked at them, and I succeeded in winning him." Professor Wayne's thoughts flew back to the gambling that night, and he shook his head and laughed. "I have never seen anyone as unlucky as him." Emperor Russell commented on this kind of person like this, not good at gambling but also likes to play. Quote. Asta was silent, he always felt that way. After a long silence, Asta returned the deed to Professor Wayne. "I think the old butler's agreement with you should be that you can help me keep it for a while, and when I have enough money, let me redeem it from you." He knew old butler Robert very well. He was a wise old man. He would not use empty friendship to ensure that Professor Wayne could return the deed to him unconditionally. Help him leave a part of the Campbell family's inheritance, and redeem it again when he has the strength. This is the arrangement he will make. The affection between you is really enviable. Professor Wayne sighed. As a well-known law professor at Backland University, he is also a rich man and has a very good butler. But he is sure that his butler will not be as loyal as Butler Robert. That is the person who dedicates his whole life to the Campbell family. The glory of the Campbell family is his wish. This is a butler that can only be cultivated by a noble family with a long history. In this case, when you can graduate from me, I will return this deed to you, as a gift from me to you." Professor Wayne took back the deed with a smile. Asta chuckled and said, "Isn't this condition too easy? Haha, so far only Fallen can truly graduate from me. I think I have learned some of your essence." "Oh, tell me about it." "Flexible bottom line, shameless mentality." Asta's tone was very pleasant, and he added in his heart, "the shadow of order." Professor Wayne is a very talented and ambitious law professor. He gave himself and lecturer Fallen two different teachings. One is the positive side of the rules, and the other is the shadow of order. Lecturer Fallen is actually very simple and silly. He does not have the identity of a noble as protection. Learning to use the law to serve the mainstream dignitaries can make him live a good life in the future. The knowledge taught to him involves many dark sides, allowing him to understand the overall structure of this society and the nature of the law. Learning to use the law and use it to benefit himself, and then waiting for himself to change the law, this should be Professor Wayne's greatest hope for himself. If Professor Wayne did not tell the truth frankly in today's conversation, but instead fooled himself like he fooled Professor Foulin, then he would definitely feel resentful because of it. In the future, when Professor Wayne is here, he will only learn his knowledge and ignore his so-called grand wishes. But Professor Wayne is indeed an old lawyer who can see into people's hearts. He knows what kind of people should be said and what things should be done. When he went to Backland University to study law, Professor Wayne must have been eyeing him, so he took the initiative to become his law teacher. Otherwise, even the president of Backland University would have difficulty making such an arrangement. He had done business with the old butler, owned the land title of the Campbell family, and was his own law teacher. These were plus points for him here. He was still young and had not yet truly integrated into the aristocratic circle. Greg Negan, the heir to the Duke, was still his close friend. Such a good seedling is a plus point for him. Why is it that once the surface of tenderness is revealed, it is all naked calculation? Is this also a lesson Professor Wayne wants to teach himself? Hastur was thoughtful, and Professor Wayne, who was sitting across from him, said with a smile, "Yes, you do learn very quickly. One answer seems to answer two questions. Being good at learning has always been my strength." Hastur also laughed. No matter what purpose Professor Wayne had, he never felt sorry for himself. The two sat and chatted for a long time. Lecturer Folan, who had gone home for a short break, also came to Professor Wayne's house. As the three of them chatted, the topic returned to the workhouse. Is Dean Dan really the source of all evil? The person who asked the question was Hastur. He wanted to give Professor Wayne a little reminder that Dean Dan was not a good person, and Vice Dean Bard, who had always been at odds with Dean Dan, was not necessarily a good person either. Professor Wayne said with emotion, "Who can tell whether it is the source or not? As long as the children living in the workhouse can live a better life, then what we do has its meaning." Seeing this, Hastur stopped saying anything. Anyway, he probably wouldn't go to the almshouse again. The three of them chatted until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Hastur left. He wanted to go back and take a rest before preparing to attend Greg's banquet tonight. Attending a banquet hosted by such a great nobleman requires a lot of preparations in advance. Dress appropriately, have the right perfume, and have a light meal before the banquet. You must also pay attention in advance to who are the nobles attending the banquet tonight, so as not to not know anyone by then. There is also a certain time to set off and arrive at the banquet venue. Generally speaking, the more powerful the nobles are, the later they will arrive. If you arrive later than the big nobles, you will definitely be ridiculed and make others unhappy. If you arrive at the same time, your appearance will appear dull and will cause the displeasure of the great nobles. What level do you think you dare to arrive at the banquet with me? This is probably the mentality. Only by arriving earlier than the nobles will you have a chance to show off your charm. Noble ladies are most familiar with this matter and care about it the most. Many noble ladies started making various preparations for this banquet several days in advance. New clothes, new gems, new diamond rings, new perfume. Always try to show your best side as much as possible. If you are lucky enough to receive an invitation to a royal banquet, then this kind of preparation will be even more terrifying. Sometimes, in order to wear a well-groomed skirt, they will go on a diet in advance, even tighten their belts, and take laxatives to make their waists appear slimmer and slimmer. The banquet held by Greg for the protagonist is not that exaggerated. After all, he is not Duke Negan. Real nobles usually only allow their descendants to attend. It needs to be taken seriously, but it's not that scary. Neil is a very reliable housekeeper and has great experience in dealing with these matters. He believed that although the Campbell family was in decline, it was not comparable to ordinary nobles. It should at least be equal to ordinary earls. After all, this is a hereditary title. If Voltaire Campbell hadn't been too outrageous, Hastur would have inherited the title of Earl. The gap between the Earl and the Baron is huge. For this reason, Neil transformed Voltaire Campbell's exclusive carriage to serve as the carriage carrying Hastur tonight. Hastur had no involvement in these careful and cumbersome arrangements, leaving everything to Neil. As Neil himself said, if a noble is bothered by something like this, then their steward must be incompetent. There is only one thing that Hastur has to do, and that is to wash up, put on the banquet dress, and wait patiently for the banquet to arrive. Queen's, Earl Hall's house. The setting sun shines through the bright stained glass and gently shines on the blonde hair of an elegant and noble girl sitting at the desk in front of the window. The girl was reading a book carefully. At the girl's feet, there was a big dog with the same golden hair lying on her stomach. It closed its eyes and moved its tail lazily, as if to dispel the boring atmosphere in the room. Boom, Boom, boom. There was a sudden knock on the study door. The sleeping golden retriever shook its golden hair and quickly got up from the ground. Who? The girl put her fingers against the pages of the book and looked at the door with an elegant posture. Miss, can you come in? You should get ready. The maid asked outside the door. The girl put the bookmark on the latest page, closed the book, and said gently, come in. Miss, you have agreed to attend Lord Greg's banquet tonight, and now you have to try on clothes. The maid walked in. Well, okay. What kind of gems do you like to wear tonight? The blue teardrop one. The girl's answers were very brief. While talking, she leaned over and stretched out her hand to tease the golden retriever's chin. The maid asked the girl some more about her preferences tonight, then turned and left, going down to prepare clothes, gems, perfumes and other things. The girl was obviously not interested in these things, but just let her maid look after the arrangements. She still had some impression of Greg. It was said that he had a good relationship with her eldest brother and was also good at business. If nothing unexpected happened, this Lord Greg would be the next Duke Negan. Due to these reasons, she did not refuse the invitation to tonight's banquet. Susie, when do you think I can find the door to the mysterious world? Viscount Glint has been recommending a man to me recently. His name seems to be Hasta Campbell. He is a young baron. He said that he once held a resurrection ceremony and survived successfully. He has a profound knowledge of mysticism. Tonight I will find a chance to observe Baron Campbell. If the impression is good, I will accept Viscount Glint's invitation to the next banquet. The girl's gentle and soothing voice flowed into the ears of the golden retriever, and only 2 barks were heard. As night fell, the factory workers dragged their tired bodies back home to eat and rest. And the good time for the nobles has just begun. Luxurious and elegant carriages, with pleasant hoof sounds, drove on King Avenue and Queens. Greg Negan, the next heir to Duke Negan, his banquets are also the most upper class in the entire aristocratic circle. Tonight's dinner starts at 7:30 and is held in a private estate of the Negan family in the northern part of Queens. Around 7 o'clock, carriages of nobles arrived one after another. One by one, noble ladies dressed gorgeously and beautifully, wearing various gemstones and diamond rings, walked lightly, showed confident and elegant smiles, got off the carriages and entered the manor. Sometimes they talked about the new dress styles that were popular recently, sometimes talked about which perfume was more fragrant and elegant, and some bolder and more open ones whispered about which man present tonight was more outstanding. As for the male nobles who were invited, they naturally left the best place for the ladies to talk, consciously standing on the periphery, holding up their wine glasses, and admiring the graceful figures deliberately displayed by the noble ladies. Then they talked about some recent news in all aspects of the kingdom, as well as some romantic anecdotes of the nobles. The carriage of Earl Hall's family arrived at the manor almost at the end of 7:30. When Audrey Hall, Backland's most dazzling gem, appeared from the carriage, all the lights here seemed to be eclipsed. Her blonde hair was dyed like pure sunlight, soft, silky and shiny, and her green eyes were as deep as the sea, as if they were dazzling gems hidden deep underground. She didn't need to compete with anyone, she just needed to stand among the crowd, and she was the most dazzling light. Holding your breath and appreciating her beauty was the unanimous choice of the male nobles present. There were not many people who could really see the pearl of Earl Hall's family at the banquet. For many people, every meeting was a baptism of beauty. Greg, the host of the banquet, came out with Hibbert Hall to welcome Audrey's arrival. Your arrival adds a lot of glory to my banquet. You are my most proud sister and the most dazzling gem tonight. Not far away, Hastur raised the wine glass in his hand, looked at Audrey, smiled, and whispered softly, "Nice to meet you, Miss Justice." Asta arrived about 10 minutes earlier than Audrey. His arrival also attracted a lot of attention, especially from the noble ladies who were chatting happily. With his tall figure, handsome face, and youthful and tender temperament, he was undoubtedly the most outstanding man among the nobles who were almost 30 years old, and he was still single, and his reputation had always been good. Fortunately, tonight was a banquet hosted by Greg, so those hot eyes were restrained. After Asta arrived, he took a quick look and found that Mrs. Germany was also invited tonight. When his eyes swept over, Mrs. Germany returned a more provocative look, and the smile in the corner of her eyes made her look a few years younger. Asta maintained a decent smile and naturally turned around to avoid the area where Mrs. Germany was. During this period, although Mrs. Germany did not block him at the door of the court, she often sent him banquet invitations, but he politely refused them one by one. Perhaps this action aroused Lady Germany's desire to win, so she simply stopped pretending and no longer sent messages in the form of invitations, but directly sent ambiguous letters in her personal name. In response, Asta always smiled and burned all the unopened letters. Apart from the accident of Lady Germany, Asta was very free here. He didn't know many noble children, and there were only 3 or 4 people who really knew him well. Some of them were not invited tonight because of their low status, and Relint, as a viscount, was not invited to the banquet. Asta guessed that this might be a way for Greg to express his dislike. Not many people knew him, so not many people came to talk to him. Apart from superficial polite greetings, he didn't have to deal with people. While tasting desserts, he listened to the nobles nearby talking about the latest current affairs and the romantic anecdotes of the upper class. Very comfortable, just like being at home. In addition to the dessert area, there is also a cooked food area, but looking at the piles of various tableware, he felt his scalp tingling and no longer planned to go to the cooked food area to eat something. In front of each kind of food, there are special knives, forks, and spoons, which add up to more than 100 kinds. And all of them are made of sterling silver. This way of showing off wealth is too high-end. When ordinary people see this scene, their courage will be dispersed by 3 points. This is still a relatively public banquet. If it is a private banquet in the home of a noble, it will be more luxurious and more etiquette. When you sit at the table, there are several kinds of tableware that you will use at the beginning. The servants will quietly change them for you according to different dishes. How to accurately select the target from these similar forks, spoons, and knives is a profound knowledge. After a banquet, each person will use dozens of tableware. If you have not received special training, you will basically make a fool of yourself on the spot. Cumbersome, exquisite, and luxurious, this is the normal life of the nobles. Asta guessed that there were probably hundreds of maids in charge of preparing for today's banquet, and the money spent would be calculated from thousands of pounds. This is the huge gap between the great nobles and the downtrodden nobles like him. It was not until Audrey's arrival that he attracted his attention. From a man's perspective, Audrey's beauty was incomparable to all the noble ladies present. From a noble's perspective, there is probably no better marriage partner than Audrey. Asta simply admired her for a while and then looked away. Audrey was very beautiful and was the most dazzling gem in Backland, but she was not the type he wanted to fall in love with. As for the marriage partner, he, a downtrodden baron, obviously could not compare with the earl's daughter who could marry into the royal family at any time. Even if their status in the future was equal, he would not have such an idea. Audrey's beauty was more suitable for standing far away to admire, just like now. Well, this caramel pudding tastes better tonight. Asta tasted most of the desserts tonight and finally determined that the dessert champion tonight belonged to the caramel pudding. To show his respect for the champion, he ate a few more bites. So you like desserts very much? While Audrey attracted everyone's attention, Mrs. Germani, who had been paying attention to Asta's movements, finally got the chance. Asta kept smiling and said meaningfully, "Sweet but not greasy, it is the best compliment for a dessert." "Are you trying to say that I am too greasy?" Mrs. Germani was very smart, and her tone became a little resentful. Asta did not say anything, and answered her with silence. If 2 people want to be together, one of them must take the initiative, otherwise the person you fancy will slip away from under your nose sooner or later. Is this another famous saying of Emperor Russell? Is he also a love saint? Germani was stunned for a moment, and the ripple atmosphere that had just emerged was ruined by this sentence. She was about to say something else, but Asta did not give her a chance and walked towards Audrey. This made her face change slightly, and she stared at Asta's back. When she saw that Asta only passed by Audrey in the end, she smiled again. "Do you want to use Miss Audrey's light to make me dim?" The little man's mind is really easy to guess. With a smile, Germani stood up and walked towards Audrey, chatting politely for a few words, and then gave Asta a provocative look. It was inexplicable. Asta had only this one thought. He just wanted to avoid Mrs. Germani and didn't want to use Audrey to reject her. This kind of thing was so boring that he wouldn't waste time on it. The banquet was halfway through and soon it was time to dance. There were many people who wanted to invite Audrey, but most people knew that they had no chance, and Audrey would not give them this opportunity. She only danced with her eldest brother Hibbert Hall, and then found an excuse to go to the lounge on the second floor of the manor to avoid this period of time. Mrs. Germani looked around, but she couldn't find Asta, which made her feel frustrated. On the second floor, in Greg's study, Asta had already left the center of the dance floor and came here to rest. When he made the request, Greg's housekeeper knew that he had a good relationship with Greg, and consciously led him to avoid Mrs. Germani. Sitting on the soft sofa in the study, Asta closed his eyes and rested for a while. He had eaten a lot of desserts tonight, and it was just the right opportunity to digest them. After a short break, Asta stood up and walked to one of the bookshelves, found a book about law and started to read it. Compared to dancing downstairs, he would rather stay here and read. At least reading books can increase his knowledge and wisdom, while dancing downstairs will only waste his time. Knock, knock, knock. 10 minutes later, someone knocked on the door. Come in. Asta flipped through the book and spoke naturally. The door opened, and two figures walked out of the door. Asta looked back and was slightly stunned. He thought that the only person who would come to the study at this time was Greg, but he didn't expect it to be Audrey and her personal maid. Well, we have to count Susie, the future fantasy dog. Audrey and Asta looked at each other, and they both felt a little surprised from each other's eyes. This is Greg's study, a private place. Generally, only close people can come here. Audrey can only come to the study with Greg's consent. I thought the person inside was a servant who was responsible for guarding the study, but I didn't expect it to be a young and handsome aristocratic boy. Judging from his age, he should be about the same age as me. After all, his temperament is young and immature, and he looks several years younger. Asta took the initiative to speak. Miss Audrey, I'm glad to meet you here. If you don't mind, enjoy a quiet reading time for a while. He was reading the most exciting part and didn't want to be distracted at this time. Yeah. Audrey nodded calmly and sat on the other side of the sofa under the vigilant protection of her personal maid. After sitting for a while, Audrey wanted to ask about the other party's identity. It can be seen that the other party is reading so seriously that she is embarrassed to disturb him. After all, she didn't know the other party, which was quite rude. After thinking about it, she left the sofa, got up and walked to several rows of bookshelves. She wanted to find suitable books here and had no intention of going back to sit on the sofa. Greg's study is very large and has a rich collection of books. Many rare books are collected here, and there are even many books that record mystical knowledge here. If she hadn't considered that her personal maid was still around, she would definitely find a related book to read. After 10 minutes or so, Asta finished reading the key points, closed the book, and looked around, and found Audrey quietly reading a book deep in the bookshelf. Asta took a look and then set his sights on Susie, the future fantasy dog. At present, Susie has not taken the potion and become an audience dog, and is only of average intelligence. Facing Asta's index finger hook, it didn't even look at it, and found a place not far from Audrey to lie down. Its tail shook gently, as if it refused all disturbances that affected its sleep. Susie should be female, right? Should I raise a big male dog in the future, and let it take the audience potion, so that it can be a pair of divine dog lovers with Susie? In this way, they can also be companions to each other, and when there is no one around, they can get together to discuss which human has done something stupid again today. Asta imagined the scene of two extraordinary dogs getting along in his mind. It feels like not many people are watching it. Am I writing too slowly and gently? I estimate that when Klein is born, he will be promoted to sequence 7, which will be around chapter 80 or 90. Is this not too slow? Oh, do you know my master? Miss Audrey, even though she usually looks so dignified and elegant, in fact there is a child who has not grown up yet living in her heart. Well, my master also has a side that no one knows about. Although he looks aristocratic in front of others and has a bright and sunny smile, in private he is very sinister and likes to eat desserts that only children like to eat. Miss Audrey sometimes likes to talk to herself, and she also likes to ask me questions, but I'm just a dog, and it's really difficult to answer these questions for her. My master likes to tease me, but those actions are too childish in my opinion. I can only be more patient and play with him for a while. Oh, they really don't let us worry. We are obviously just a dog, but we have to worry so much about them. Yes, we are obviously just dogs. The two extraordinary dogs looked at each other and fell into deep thought. This picture is so familiar. Asta thought for a moment, but decided to give up the idea of raising an extraordinary dog that could rival Susie. If they really get together, God knows what they can talk about. It is estimated that by then, all the privacy of himself and Audrey will be stripped away. It's better to raise other extraordinary creatures. Cats are quite good. You can let it go out to collect some information, and you can pet the cat when nothing happens. It's best to enhance its combat power so that it can chase Susie around in the future. Hasta couldn't stop thinking. Susie, who was sleeping on the ground, shuddered, glanced around in panic, and finally took a frightened look at Hasta, who was deep in thought. The only wisdom it has tells it, this human being is not easy to mess with, so stay away from him in the future. Susie got up, came to Audrey's feet, rubbed her trousers, and then lay down again where Hasta could not see her, wagging her golden tail. There was no trace of Susie in his sight, and Hasta also retracted his scattered thoughts and focused his attention on the book in his hand again. There is something unusual about the Book of Law that is worthy of being collected by Greg. The content of this book and the themes it represents are both rebellious and righteous. In the book, the author severely condemns the imperfection of the Lotm law and believes that the current Lotm law pays too much attention to the interests of the nobility. However, the nobles of the old era no longer have the ability to make new cakes. The rights should be transferred, at least from the old nobles. Shunt out from the hand. In this process, the law also pays attention to justice. Whether it is procedural justice or resultant justice, ordinary people must see the hope that everyone is equal before the law. The more Hasta read, the more he felt that this book was very similar to the style of Lecturer Fullen, which emphasized the justice of rules. Could this book really be written by Professor Fullen? Asta flipped through a few more pages, feeling more and more that the content in the book was very similar to the insights that Professor Fullen would say. He directly turned the book to the last page, and found that Professor Fullen's name was not found in the author's signature, but Professor Wayne's name appeared. Wayne Elric. Tisk, Professor Wayne in his youth turned out to be Lecturer Fullen today. Hasta smiled slightly and whispered, closing the book, and for a moment he had no desire to open the book again. Of course, there are many disadvantages in the Lotm law, but many of these disadvantages are to protect the interests of the nobles, and he is a noble. In the future, he will definitely not be limited to a baron, but will become a duke and a prince. This is not only the glory of the Campbell family's rise, but also the only path to his extraordinary path. When he stood at the top of the nobility, his interests naturally represented the interests of the nobility. To weaken his own interests and achieve the perfection of the law, he didn't think he would make such a choice when he got to that position. Equality and freedom sounds wonderful, but it is not suitable for this era at this stage. He quite agrees with the concept revealed by Adam becoming a god, and it is in line with the future trend of the times. Every era has its own wave. He won't make waves in secret like Adam, but when a new wave appears, he doesn't mind giving it a little push. The end of the world is coming soon. If you think about it carefully, this kind of thing is nothing at all. Hasta leaned on the sofa, closing his eyes and thinking. He didn't open his eyes until the door opened again. Two more figures opened the door and came in. One was tonight's protagonist, Greg, and the other was Audrey's eldest brother Hibbert. This is my good friend, Hasta Campbell, the current heir of the Campbell family. Greco introduced Hibbert with a smile. I have heard the name of Baron Campbell from many noble ladies. When I saw him today, I realized that they were still too modest. Hibbert made a little joke to express his friendliness and closeness. Only when I see Lord Hibbert can I understand how handsome Roll Hall was when he was young. After the two sides exchanged a few words, Greco and Hibbert also sat on the sofa. Deep in the bookshelf, Audrey, who was flipping through books, paused for a moment, listened carefully for a while, and then whispered in her heart. It turns out that he is Baron Hasta Campbell, who is knowledgeable in the occult. This time, Grey Lint seems not to beautify his friend too much. Her first impression of Baron Hasta Campbell was that he was a scholar who loved reading and studying knowledge. This made Grelint's words about his profound knowledge of mysticism highly credible. Woof. Susie suddenly shouted twice, interrupting Audrey's thoughts and successfully attracting the attention of the three people on the sofa. Is my sister here too? Hibbert still had a smile on his face, but his expression was much more serious. She said she wanted to visit my study before, but she didn't expect to come to this study. Greg said, looking at Asta, and curiously said, Asta, did you have any unpleasant conversation with Miss Audrey? This question made Asta a little difficult to answer. From the time Audrey entered the door until now, he had only said one sentence to her. It would be too rude to say this. After all, facing the beauty of Audrey, few men can resist the urge to talk to her, right? Seeing that Hasta did not immediately respond, Hibbert frowned slightly, and Greg teased, Asta, as a noble, when facing a beautiful lady, excessive enthusiasm will make the other party avoid you. Obviously, Greg misunderstood something just like Hibbert. Asta sighed, he had no intention of teasing Audrey. Miss Audrey's beauty shocked me so much that I only had time to say a word of praise. Hasta tried to be more tactful. Dear brother, are you frowning because you suspect that Baron Campbell will do something impolite to me? If so, you will lose Baron Campbell, an excellent friend. Audrey came over with a smile accompanied by her personal maid, and she started by teasing her brother to ease the awkward atmosphere. Hibbert smiled and said, Your beauty always makes me, your elder brother, deeply worried about you. Any excessive speculation seems so reasonable under your beauty. The two sentences of one question and one answer made the original awkward atmosphere disappear. As expected of a noble who is good at polite words, he made people feel comfortable when he spoke. As the protagonist of tonight, Greg only chatted for a while and went downstairs to receive other guests. Hibbert was very interested in Hasta. There were only 2 or 3 people who could be called friends by Greg. Even in Greg's eyes, he was just a partner, an ally in politics and business. Audrey was also very interested in Hasta's knowledge of mysticism, but she was not in a hurry. After chatting for a while, she left under the escort of her personal maid and gave the opportunity to chat tonight to her elder brother. We met before. You were still very young at that time. I didn't expect that it would be several years before we met again. Without outsiders present, Hibbert's tone was much more casual. Well, it should be 5 years. Asta had met Hibbert at a banquet. At that time, Voltaire Campbell had not yet lost his house in Queens. As the heir of the hereditary earl, it was normal for him to go to such high-class banquets. 5 years is really a long time. Looking at you, I can't help but think of my brother who is far away in the southern continent. He should also miss you as his brother in the southern continent. Asta smiled and replied, muttering in his heart, if it weren't for you, your brother probably wouldn't leave Backland to go to the southern continent to open up wasteland and fight. There can only be one heir in a noble family. Hibbert was luckier than his brother Alfred Hall. He was born earlier in this world, so the different destinies of the two people were determined. If Alfred didn't leave Backland, he would have to rely on Hibbert to live all his life. Although he had no worries about food and clothing and lived a good life, he would never see the hope of getting ahead. Going to the southern continent to fight was Alfred's only choice out of self-esteem and to prove himself. The ball was over, and those who were attracted to each other had already met in the back garden. Those who were not attracted to each other could only taste the loneliness of the night silently. Mrs. Germani, who looked down on other men, was sulking, looking at those noble ladies who were obviously more radiant than before with envy. What made her even more angry was that not long ago, Greg's butler came to tell her not to bother Baron Hasta Campbell anymore, so as not to affect his reputation. From now on, I will update twice every night, which will look better and save everyone from chasing new chapters. April 2nd, Sunday. Asta got up at 8 o'clock, got dressed, had breakfast, and took a carriage to Backland University. In the carriage, Asta quietly thought about the extraordinary party that would be held tonight. He had already collected all the extraordinary materials needed for the barbarian potion formula, except for a solid unicorn crystal of the earth rhino. The extraordinary party at the Brave Bar was too slow to collect materials, and there was no news of the solid unicorn crystal of the earth rhino. In addition, there was a lady who was also about to be promoted to a barbarian who was also collecting this extraordinary material, so it was difficult for him to collect it in a short time. In order to get the barbarian potion as soon as possible, he planned to attend the extraordinary party held by Mr. A tonight. Although the people of the Aurora Club were more crazy, their level was much higher than the extraordinary party at the Brave Bar. It should not be too difficult to purchase the solid unicorn crystal of the Earth Rhino at the party. He could prepare a little more gold pounds for this. What made him more embarrassed at the moment was how to hide his true identity as much as possible at the extraordinary party held by Mr. A. Although it is quite normal for a noble to embark on the Black Emperor path, he does not want too many people to know his position before he becomes really strong. Of course, he has another choice, which is to seek help from Greg. As the heir of Duke Negan, he is not short of the protection of extraordinary people. Maybe he is also an extraordinary person on the Black Emperor path. Although the solid unicorn crystal of the Earth Rhino is difficult to buy, the Greg family must have a lot of stock. Asta thought for a long time and decided to put seeking help from Greg as the last alternative and try his luck with Mr. A first. The carriage passed all the way and soon arrived at Backland University. Professor Wayne had been waiting in the classroom one step ahead, and was writing the legal knowledge to be taught today on the blackboard. Have you finished reading the 3 books I recommended to you last time? Remember them? Professor Wayne asked casually while writing on the blackboard. Yes, I have remembered them. Let me test you. Professor Wayne began to ask about the contents of the 3 legal books to test whether Asta really mastered the knowledge in them. After asking 7 or 8 questions in a row, Asta answered them one by one. Professor Wayne nodded with satisfaction and put down the chalk in his hand. Very good, your memory is not bad, and you are indeed suitable to be a lawyer. Asta smiled and said, it's all because of the teacher's good teaching. After the last incident in the workhouse, he also followed Lecturer Foreign to call Professor Wayne teacher, which is a more intimate name. I will accept this compliment. Emperor Russell once said, the disciple is better than the master. Asta's smile froze slightly, and he couldn't help but complain in his heart, how come Emperor Russell is everywhere? Also, the teacher's words mean to praise me, not you. Come on, let's start today's class. After chatting for a few words, Professor Wayne entered the teaching state. After finishing today's study, Asta did not leave the classroom, but stayed in his seat to copy the knowledge points on the blackboard. This made him feel like he was dreaming back to high school. Every time after class, the teacher would end the get out of class early and leave them a blackboard of knowledge points for them to copy. They even said that at this time, people from other classes were rushing to the cafeteria, and the road would be very crowded, and they would get hurt if they were not careful. It would be better to leave school 10 minutes later to avoid the peak period. This sentence sounds reasonable, but other teachers also think so. Asta silently copied the content on the blackboard, took a break, and looked at the time. It was 11:40. After waiting for about 10 minutes, Lecturer Foreign appeared. Mr. Asta, please forgive me for wasting some time today. This time is just right. I just finished my homework. The two smiled and exchanged a few words. Lecturer Foreign went to the cafeteria with Asta for dinner. It has been a week since the last Greg banquet ended. In the past week, Asta often enjoyed lunch with Lecturer Foreign. The two were both students valued by Professor Wayne. They got along well in many aspects, especially Lecturer Foreign was good at chatting and telling stories. He could tell a plain legal story in an exceptionally exciting and attractive way. He can also disassemble complicated legal cases in the simplest way so that people can easily understand the meaning. He is really suitable to be a law lecturer. In addition to these 2 points, every afternoon, as long as Lecturer Foreign has free time, he will take Asta to the Sherwood district to be a legal aid, helping some poor people who cannot afford lawyers for free. This move is very helpful for Asta to digest the lawyer potion. In a few days, he should be able to completely digest the lawyer potion. Sherwood District. There are a large number of low-end civilians living here. Although their lives are not rich, they can basically maintain food and clothing, and they are not as chaotic and poor as the East District. Lecturer Foreign and Asta arrived at 2 o'clock in the afternoon by steam train. As a lawyer with a strong sense of justice, Lecturer Foreign once established a legal association with other lawyers, called the Association for the Study of Justice. When Asta first heard the name of this association, he wanted to change it directly to the Justice League. After thinking about it, I decided to forget it. After all, Lecturer Foreign and the others are just ordinary people. It is better to leave the fight against crime to the 7 major churches. The Justice Research Association has a secret base in the Jowood district, which is difficult for ordinary people to know. According to Lecturer Folan, this is not an ordinary base, but a place of hope for the future laws of Loan. It is the soil for the birth of justice and the spear for the implementation of fairness. Well, it is actually an ordinary law firm. The entire Justice Research Association, including Asta who has not yet officially joined, has only 5 people. Lecturer Folan and Asta came to the law firm. The other 3 people were busy with their own affairs for the time being. Today, the 2 of them will provide legal aid to those in need. Asta chose the place for legal aid near the Holy Wind Church. Originally, Lecturer Folan wanted to set the location near the poorhouse. After all, there were more people who needed help there. But this proposal was directly rejected by Asta. A place like the poorhouse is impossible to be safer than the area near the Holy Wind Church. Although Storm Pigeon is sometimes very irritable, he will never stand by and watch when he needs to take action, and he still feels safe. Moreover, if he encounters an irresistible force, he can still shout his name and seek his help. The clergy of the nearby Holy Wind Church knew the purpose of Asta and Lecturer Foran, so they came specially to provide them with some help. In the 2 temporarily rented rooms, Asta and Lecturer Foran each chose one as their workplace for today. Asta sat on a chair, his hands naturally placed on the table, with a cup of Earl Grey tea and his heavy cane on the side. After adjusting his mentality a little and lowering the black curtain, Asta's eyes became sharper. His expression was serious. He looked at the door of the room, and said in a deep voice, "Come in." When he first came here to act as a legal aid, because he was smiling, gentle, and looked a little immature, it was easy for people to doubt his professionalism. Male help seekers were okay, they would implicitly express that they would refer to the suggestions, and then turn to the door of Lecturer Foran to line up. Some female help seekers are more troublesome. Generally, people who need legal aid have pain in their hearts that they want to vent. When facing Asta, they naturally regard him as a listener and a bucket for tears. Some people cried heartbreakingly in the last second, and begged Asta to hug her in the next second. Others approached Asta quietly while talking about their tragic experiences. This made him very uncomfortable, but he couldn't say harsh words to drive people away. In short, it was very uncomfortable. Later, he discussed with Lecturer Folan and decided to draw a black curtain in front of the table to block the sight of the help seekers. This method is really good. It not only blocks those in trustworthy sites, but also saves a lot of unnecessary entanglements, and increases confidentiality, making the help seekers more willing to reveal their hearts. After waiting for about 5 seconds, the first help seeker of the day came in. Asta also couldn't see the other party clearly, and could only guess their identity from their words and deeds. Today's help seeker should be a middle-aged man in his 40s, and his trouble is about the distribution of property. He has 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl. The eldest son is 23 years old this year, the youngest son is 11 years old this year, and the daughter is 17 years old and has not married yet. Originally, his family conditions were just above the poverty line. Although the family was not very rich in material terms, they had a good relationship with each other. But when he made a lot of money last year because of luck and vision, the originally happy family underwent subtle changes. The eldest son has married and has a child. Logically, he should be the best choice to inherit the property, but the eldest son's mother is no longer alive, and the youngest son's mother is his current wife. Regarding the division of property, she naturally wants to fight for her son. Dividing the family is the solution she proposed. Let the eldest son's family move to other places to live, and give him a sum of money, and then the rest of the property will be inherited by her son. The eldest son's family was naturally unwilling, and he even threatened his stepmother many times that if he could not inherit the property, he would not care about any brotherly love. The implication is that he might be cruel to his younger brother. When facing huge property disputes, this kind of thing is not uncommon. As long as other possible inheritors are eliminated, the eldest son will be the only heir. The thing that this person seeking help is most afraid of is the tragedy of his sons killing each other, so he dared not make a decision. Asta listened to the middle-aged man's story silently, and he had an idea in his mind. This kind of thing is actually very common, and it is more obvious in the homes of nobles. Fortunately, the Loan law only guarantees the inheritance rights of the eldest son, and how much the other descendants can get depends on how generous the eldest son is. Even if he doesn't give 1 penny and directly drives others out, there is no problem in law. However, such behavior is very undignified. Generally speaking, no nobles will do such a thing. On the contrary, they will give their brothers a part of the considerable property to show their generosity. Another point is that the stepmother cannot directly interfere with the distribution of the nobles' property. No matter how favored she is, her children cannot inherit the title unless there are no other suitable heirs in front of her children. Ordinary civilians do not have much property, and generally do not have much property to inherit. What they inherit may even be a pile of debts. In this case, it is difficult to have property disputes. The more common cases are about the support of the elderly. What outcome do you want most? Of course, our family can live in harmony and no longer have barriers and disputes over money. I also hope that my eldest son can be kinder and treat his younger brother better. Then you are willing to leave all the family property to your eldest son to inherit it in exchange for his taking care of your younger son in the future. I no longer dare to expect him to have such a kind heart. This is also what I have been struggling with. Then you prefer to hand over the property to your young son. He's still too young. Having said this, Hasta already understood the middle-aged man's thoughts. He would rather distribute his property to his younger son, but because his older son may act impulsively, he will get into trouble. It is not difficult to solve his troubles, just let him postpone the inheritance of property until his younger son grows up. You can divide your property into 2 parts, large and small, and then find an excellent notary to complete the notarization and protect the property for you. Wait 10 years or after your death, and then let the notary public handle the property according to your wishes, to allocate. Hasta offered his own little advice, even though it was a bit unfair to the eldest son. But this is not something that a lawyer like him should consider. He is just protecting their employer's interests within the scope allowed by Lotm's laws. If the person who comes here to seek help from him today is the eldest son of a middle-aged man, then he will try his best to fight for his eldest son's interests within the scope of Lotm's law. In this aspect, lawyer's attitude is still very equal. The middle-aged man hesitated and said, "But shouldn't the property inheritance rights belong exclusively to the eldest son? That's what those noble men do. First of all, you are not a noble, and there is no title in your family that needs to be inherited. Secondly, the Lotm law has different requirements for nobles and commoners in this regard. Finally, there are certain prerequisites to ensure the priority of inheritance for the eldest son, even if it is a noble gentleman." Hasta explained, if the eldest son is poor in all aspects, for example, he is extremely unfilial, has a bad reputation, and people have a low opinion of him, then he can be replaced by a better heir. The Lotm law also leaves a certain amount of leeway for the nobles in this regard. As for civilians such as middle-aged men, their property distribution is not worthy of being truly protected by the law. To put it another way, middle-aged men have greater freedom than nobles when it comes to distributing property. Then, if the notary office embezzles my property in the future, what should I do to protect my rights and interests? The middle-aged man has already made some moves. At this point, Hasta can't guarantee anything. Even if the money is deposited in the bank, it may be stolen. No matter what industry there are trustworthy and untrustworthy people. I can only hope that you can find a notary who is truly fair and just. The middle-aged man was silent for a long time, then stood up, took off his hat and saluted, "Thank you for your guidance. Being able to help you is the greatest compliment to me." Hasta responded with a smile. "I think I should pay a certain amount of gold pounds as a reward for this matter, but I feel that this is an insult to your noble character." The middle-aged man suddenly said this when he was leaving the house. Hasta looked calm and was speechless. After a minute of rest, a second caller walked in from outside. The voice sounded like that of a woman. Her trouble was the divorce issue of her husband cheating on her. This problem is not difficult to solve, either divorce or continue to make do. Of course, if the situation is intense, it may turn into a family homicide. This lady no longer wants to continue living with her current husband and wants to use this matter to obtain more financial compensation for herself and her children. This is a very reasonable request and is also protected by the law of Lotm. But the two did not reach an agreement on the issue of financial compensation. The husband believed that the financial compensation demanded by his wife was too much, while the wife believed that this was a reasonable request from the betrayed party. After several discussions ended unhappily, the husband made harsh words, either accepting the amount of compensation he proposed or going to court to sue him. After recounting her experience, the lady asked in a low voice, "I heard people say that if I really want to go to court to sue him, the judge will not side with me. Instead, he will think that the amount of compensation I request is too excessive." Asta tapped the fingers of his right hand on the table to signal the lady to pay more attention. After she waited quietly for a while, Asta spoke. "The law will indeed protect the interests of the cheated party in the marriage, and the amount of compensation will be appropriately increased during divorce due to this incident. However, the law does not specify the amount of this amount, nor does it detail the fraction of the property. Normally, the two parties would conduct multiple mediations and then compromise on a compensation range acceptable to both parties." Quote, "If your husband is never willing to accept mediation, it will be difficult for you to obtain adequate compensation from him in the end, even if it is what you deserve. In this matter, law is more in the interests of men, because cheating is not uncommon among Loan nobles. But the way aristocratic couples get along is different from that of commoners. Even if they find out that the other party has cheated and betrayed, they may still continue to live together and then play their own lives. At this point, cheating can hardly be a reasonable request for more financial compensation. If one of the civilian couples cheats, it will be a big deal for the whole family, and the originally happy life will most likely fall apart. Then how should I protect my own interests?" The lady was a little anxious. Asta smiled and said, "Excuse me, are you a believer of the goddess?" "Yes, I have always believed in the goddess devoutly. She is the most important pillar of my soul. It is her gentleness that has helped me get through this most difficult period." "Praise the goddess," the lady said, devoutly tapping her chest 4 times, drawing a crimson moon. "Then what faith does your husband have?" "He is a believer of the storm." At this point, the lady gritted her teeth and said, "I should have listened to my parents' advice and stayed away from believers of the storm. They are so rude and ruthless that they are not suitable to spend their lives with each other." Asta thought for a while and said, "Is he also a businessman?" "Yes, he is engaged in some shipping business and has made a lot of money in these years. It was at this time that he betrayed our love." "Well, then you go to the court to sue him, but before that, you can go to the goddess's church to tell the clergy about your grievances and let more people know about your husband's cheating. Will this work? It should take a few days, and he will take the initiative to find you for peace, and then your demands will be met." The lady didn't know why the lawyer behind the curtain had such confidence, but such words were very trustworthy and useful. The two chatted for a while, and the lady made a small request, wanting to open the curtain to take a look at Asta. For such a small request, Asta naturally smiled and refused. Finally, the lady praised Asta's voice for being very gentle, and then she got up and left. In the following time, Hasta adhered to the basic qualities of a lawyer and provided corresponding advice to many help seekers. The help seeker who impressed him the most was an old man. He should be 60 years old. He spoke in a low voice and occasionally stopped to take a breath. In his intermittent narration, a cruel story was told. The old man was not a native of Backland. He came from Winter County. Because Winter County is close to Fasak, the situation often changes with the relationship between the two countries. Some areas have been fighting with Fasak for many years, and it has been a deadly feud for generations. The old man came from such a family. His grandfather and grandfather both died in the war with Fasak. After his father was killed, he also inherited the iron will of his ancestors. He joined the army without hesitation to participate in the war to defend the country. After several years, he fought hundreds of battles, big and small, and fought hard. In a battlefield with such a terrible mortality rate, he still survived with his courage and luck. When he was 28 years old, he was seriously injured and separated from the main force. He fled all the way and escaped from the border into the territory of Fasak. He fainted near a stream. Like the hero in the legend, he was rescued and taken to a village ruled by Fasak. In order to survive, he lied that he was a soldier of Fasak and survived the fight with the Loan army. Perhaps his acting was very realistic, or the villagers were too innocent and kind, so he managed to get away with it and stayed in the village to recuperate. His scars made him look very manly, which attracted the admiration of many girls. Among them, there was a young girl who made it difficult for him to control himself. Soon, the two had a relationship and the girl became pregnant. When the girl shyly pulled his hand, put it in his ear, and whispered to him that she was pregnant with his child, he woke up from this short-lived gentleness. He was a soldier of Lotm, and the people here were all people of Fasak. What they discussed on weekdays was how invincible Fasak's army was, how many enemies they had killed during this period, and the Lotm kingdom was also their hunting target. These people are enemies, the descendants of the murderers who killed their ancestors. The feud between Fasak and Lotm is a contradiction that can never be reconciled. He struggled, was cowardly, and secretly rejoiced that he actually had offspring, but he was more afraid that could not be wiped out. He was forcing himself to make a cruel decision, just like the cowardly apostle in the ballad who knew it was not allowed but still wanted to make a deal with the devil. In the end, he still took action. While the village was holding a celebration of the harvest, he contacted a Lotm team wandering in the nearby mountains. Soon the disaster came, and the whole village was washed by blood. Even the young girl who loved him and was pregnant with his child could not escape. They all died and were eventually burned to ashes by a fire. He, the executioner, was also commended by his superiors for this matter and received a lot of rewards. He tried his best not to think about the right and wrong of this matter, and concentrate on fighting with the Fasak army. But the more he fought, the more confused he became. What was the reason for him to fight? To defend the country. But he was also a murderer and arsonist. Lotm might not have no intention of annexing Fasak. Who was the righteous side? In the end, he put down his weapon, left the battlefield, left Winter County, and came to Backland, known as the City of Hope. It was here that he saw what a superior noble was, what a war that was like a child's play, and what the benefits of mutual cooperation were. It turned out that the people who were truly hostile to each other and were mortal enemies were only the lower-class people like them. He looked at the capital of the kingdom that he had once protected. If he had known earlier that his bloody battles were just victims of the struggle for interests among the bigwigs, would he have continued to fight hard on the battlefield? If he had been born in Backland, would his attitude towards the Fasak army have been different? In a trance, he dreamed of the girl who loved him wholeheartedly and his unborn child. Would he be a boy or a girl? If he had stayed in that village, would his child have married and had children, or married and had children, and lived a good life? If he had stayed in that village. If you stay in that village. This is a question that the old man has been thinking about over the years. He also knows that time cannot flow backwards and he cannot return to the intersection where he made a new choice. He came here to tell this story because of the guilt in his heart and to repent of his past sins. He wanted to go to court to face his belated trial. But he didn't know whether the court would accept the absurd behavior of an old man like him. Perhaps those judges and jurors will just think that they are old fools, sneer at their own stories, and even praise their imaginary stories as not bad, and then easily tell them as jokes when they are drunk and gossiping. This question made Hasta fall into silence. It is impossible for the kingdom of Lotm to allow the old man to go to court and admit that the past killings were wrong. Because in this way, the wrong people are not just the old people, but the royal family and the powerful. Moreover, this is also a disguised admission that the war between the Lotm kingdom and Fasak is far less just than ordinary people think. This is absolutely not allowed. If the old man's story were told from a different perspective, for example, the man rescued by the village was a soldier of Fasak, and the place that was destroyed was a village in the kingdom of Lotm. Then, the Lotm royal family and dignitaries will definitely let the old man tell such a thing at a critical moment, so that the people can see Fasak's cruelty and terror. Unfortunately, it cannot be replaced. Is the old man at fault? Hasta is not qualified to judge him, but if the protagonist is him, he will only quietly take away the girl who loves him wholeheartedly after recovering from the injury, then leave the battlefield and find a quiet small village to spend the rest of his life. Sir, I don't think I can help you in this matter. Hasta said, his tone solemn and apologetic. If he was involved in this matter, the final result would be just one more drowned noble body in the Tasak River. Your words are the greatest help to me. The old man stood up tremblingly, with no trace of disappointment on his face, as if he was not surprised by such an answer. Sir, there are many things that we can't change now. Asta thought for a long time and finally said this. Yes, I understand. The old man's tone was very relaxed, with a faint smile on his face. He said goodbye to Hasta and turned to leave. Hasta suddenly wanted to open the curtain and take a look at this legendary old man. But he still resisted the urge. Even if he saw him, he couldn't help him. After the old man left, Hasta sat quietly for a long time, and finally sighed. As expected, he still couldn't just sit back and watch the old man die. After a moment of silence, Hasta stood up and left through the back door. After going to say hello to Lecturer Fulin, he took a carriage to the nearest court. When he arrived at the court, Asta glanced at his pocket watch. It was 5:20, which was 40 minutes before the court closed. He got out of the carriage and stood waiting near the courthouse gate. If he guessed correctly, the old man should already be on his way here. From the old man's confession to his final relief, Hasta already understood what he was thinking. Although the old man knows that his behavior is absurd and ridiculous and nothing can be changed, he still does it because he is old. Some people will become extremely panicked when death is approaching, while others will feel relieved when they look back on the past. The old man belongs to the latter, so he will come, and today. After waiting for about 10 minutes, Hasta saw an old man getting off the carriage. The old man was wearing a black formal suit, leaning on a cane, and his silver hair was neatly combed. The deep wrinkles carved by the years were like knives and axes. His dark brown pupils contained the calmness of the vicissitudes of life, and the faint smile on his face was calmness in facing the ups and downs of life. With just one glance, Hasta recognized that this was the old man who had just asked for his help. The old man looked at the court in front of him, where crimes were judged, and subconsciously bent down. Then he straightened up again and walked towards him with firm steps. As he approached the door of the court, Hasta took a step forward and said, "Sir, you can only repent for the things you are guilty of while you are alive." The old man paused, looked at Hasta carefully, and said with a smile, "May you have no regrets in the future." Same for you. It was an afternoon full of surprises. Under the gaze of Hasta, the old man walked into the court with a smile. Hasta did not follow, nor did he say anything. He just watched silently as the old man disappeared from sight and entered the hall that symbolized judgment. Baron Campbell, we meet again. Thank you for your generosity last time. At night, at Grey Linte's house, Hasta met Zio and Forsey again. In order to get in touch with the extraordinary party held by Mr. A, Hasta sought the introduction of Forsey through Grey Lint, nominally claiming that he was interested in this extraordinary party. Unexpectedly, Zio also followed Forsey this time. "Ms. Hugh, I would also like to thank you for your contribution to rescuing Professor Wayne last time." Hasta replied with a smile. 3 question marks flashed over Forsey's head. He glanced at Hasta and then stared at Zio, trying to find out the relationship between them from their conversations and expressions. Just an unexpected hire. Zio couldn't stand Forsey's gaze, so she could only give a simple explanation. Seeing Forsey's thoughtful gaze, Zio secretly touched her shoulder and told her to pay attention to her image. "It's getting late, we can go." "Well, I'm sure it will be an interesting night." Hasta smiled and left in a carriage with Forsey and Zio. As for Viscount Grey Lint, he had something to deal with tonight and really couldn't get away. He just entrusted Hasta to help him ask the pharmacist for the potion formula matter. The last time Forsey took over this task, there was no news after that. It was not until he contacted him some time ago that Forsey politely apologized to him and said that he had no way to find the vampires hiding in the night. In fact, Forsey just asked Zio to post a mission to find vampires, and then nothing happened again. The carriage drove for more than 10 minutes before reaching its destination, which was a wooden house on the roadside. The environment here looked very desolate and remote. The 3 of them got off the carriage and came to the wooden door. Zio said, "It's better to try not to reveal your true identity when attending this extraordinary gathering." In order to prepare for this extraordinary gathering, she herself went through no less than 3 layers of disguise, and even used insoles to increase her height. Well, she swore that it was really just a little bit higher. This was out of the need to disguise, not because she disliked herself for being too short. Hasta also went through some disguise, wearing a black robe that could cover his whole body, and a black hood to block his hair color, and his face was wearing a randomly bought cat face mask. He was leaning on a cane that could draw out a sharp sword when necessary. This was a good thing he found while sorting out the relics left by the original owner. This cane is silver gray in color. The head of the cane is inlaid with a large white-yellow crystal. A short section of the cane is twisted in a spiral pattern. Inside the cane is an elegant and slender sword, about 60 centimeters in length. Hasta tried to pull out the sword to test its strength. It was very thin and sharp, and could easily cut through hard bones. The steel was unusual, and the forging skills were excellent, so it was not easy to curl the blade. He suspected that this sword might be some extraordinary weapon, but he had not discovered its extraordinary use yet. Seeing that Hasta and 4C were ready, Zio came to the wooden door and knocked on it in a rhythm of 3 long and 2 short. With a creak, the wooden door slowly opened, and there were already many participants sitting inside. Most of them used various methods to hide their true appearance, and only a few of them revealed their true appearance calmly. The 3 of them walked in, and the wooden door was closed again by the attendant. Their arrival attracted the attention of everyone present, among which Mr. A's gaze was the most impressive. His eyes were like 2 slippery tentacles, crawling over people's bodies as they looked, as if they wanted to pull off other people's clothes and penetrate deeply. This goosebump feeling was disgusting. This also made Hasta recognize who Mr. A was at a glance, but he remained silent and deliberately showed a hint of curiosity. Zio introduced, "That person is Mr. A powerful extraordinary person and the convener of this extraordinary gathering." Hasta nodded silently, while 4C looked at the 2 blackboards erected in front of him, with lines of words written on them. Hugh introduced some of the trading rules here to Hasta, who came here for the first time to attend an extraordinary gathering. What's on the blackboard is the deal the participants want to make. They will write down what they need and what price they are willing to pay for it. If someone likes it and is willing to trade, they can directly complete the transaction. All transactions are notarized by Mr. A, and there will be no fraud. Hasta listened silently, and then imitated 4C and began to write his needs on the blackboard. In addition to the Earth Rhinoceros solid horn crystal, he also wrote the Medicine Man's potion recipe. He is not here to buy Russell's diary, that would be too eye-catching. He could already feel Mr. A's eyes falling on him from time to time, as if he was measuring something. Soon, each transaction was completed under the witness of Hasta and the other 3. But until near the end of the party, there was no news about the Medicine Man's potion formula or the Earth Rhino solid unicorn crystal that Hasta needed. What a failed party. It seems we need to ask Greco for help. Hasta murmured in his heart that his lawyer potion was almost digested and he needed to gather the barbarian potion ingredients as soon as possible. Just when Hasta was disappointed with tonight's party, an attendant quietly came to him, handed him a note, and whispered, "This is for you from Mr. A." Hasta unfolded the note, which read, "If you are willing to become a secret prayer, you can provide the Earth Rhinoceros solid horn crystal for free." Hasta's first reaction was, Mr. A is really reckless. As long as you have enough understanding of occultism, you will know that the secret prayer person is on the Hanged Man pathway, which is the pathway that the Aurora Club is good at and manipulates. The reputation of the Aurora Society in the supernatural world is that everyone shouts about it. It is a force hostile to the Church of the 7 Gods and is equivalent to a terrorist organization in peaceful times. Their members usually hide in the shadows, and only when they take action do people realize how terrifying they are. Mr. A's current behavior is equivalent to directly asking you if you want to buy a submachine gun in peacetime. If you encounter a more righteous person, you will definitely report it directly to the official organization. Hasta's second reaction, does Mr. A like him? I have always heard that the Aurora Society is rich in beauties, and they attach great importance to their appearance. No matter whether they are men or women, they are all welcome. The more good-looking someone is, the more they like them. To put it simply, it is a complete look control. Hasta's third reaction was rejection. Not to mention that he was about to be promoted to Sequence 8 Barbarian. Even if he had not set foot on the Black Emperor path, he would not choose the Hanged Man path. There are several extraordinary people in this path who are crazy. The only difference between them is that some people are relatively crazy and some people are very crazy. Aurora's big stage, don't come if you're not crazy. Forgive me for refusing, I prefer to be a medicine man. Hasta wrote a sentence on the note and asked the attendant to pass it to Mr. A. Mr. A opened the note and glanced at it, then turned his attention to Hasta again. After a while of silence, he wrote another sentence on the note. Soon, Hasta received a reply from Mr. A right in front of him again. Everything is a gift from the Lord. We all need to stay close to the Lord. He is the only salvation in the last days. Hasta was silent. He really didn't know how to complain about Mr. A's thinking logic. This sentence simply exposes the word preaching nakedly in front of me. Doesn't Mr. A know that at this kind of extraordinary gathering, the more enthusiastic he is, the easier it will be to arouse resistance from others? Am I so easily deceived? I am a believer in the goddess and will not deviate from her. Hasta replied politely to save Mr. A from pestering him. Less than 2 minutes later, Mr. A once again asked the waiter to send a reply. Earth rhinoceros solid single horn crystal, 300 pounds. Hasta thought for a moment and then wrote, "Deal," on the note. I'm not used to Mr. A's psychology, but faced with this kind of reasonable deal that comes to his door, he can't give up. Zio and 4C stared at Hasta for a long time, their eyes full of curiosity. In the circle they knew, Mr. A could almost be said to be the most powerful Beander. It was incredible that such a person would value a newcomer who came to the party for the first time so much. As you know, I have always been very popular. Hasta explained with a smile. Yes, I heard people say that Mr. A is a very handsome man, and it is normal for you to be valued by him. Shu smiled and made a point. Hasta was silent, decided to drop the topic, and asked, "What did you gain tonight?" No. Zio and 4C shook their heads together. One of them didn't have much idea about promotion, and the other was seriously short of money. After the transaction, we took a 10-minute break and then came to the free communication session. Hasta had no interest in this link, but he always felt that Mr. A's eyes often glanced at him, which forced him to show that he was interested in all kinds of knowledge. Are any of you interested in the words left by Emperor Russell? Someone held up a piece of paper and looked around at everyone with excitement. Hasta remained silent. 4C glanced at him quietly and whispered, "Can the deal you mentioned last time continue?" Hasta said, "I only accept the original manuscript of Emperor Russell. Other imitations have no collection value." Then how to determine whether it is the original manuscript of Emperor Russell? I know a professor with rich historical knowledge. He is very knowledgeable in this field. And isn't Mr. A also very good at identification? 4C glanced at Mr. A, then whispered a few words into Zio's ear. Soon, Zio stood up and walked towards the man who claimed to study the mysterious writings of Emperor Russell. After communicating with him enthusiastically for a while, he successfully retrieved 3 original manuscripts said to be left by Emperor Russell. Hasta just glanced twice and saw that 2 of them were copies made by later generations, and only one was the real original manuscript of Russell's diary. Chinese handwriting is difficult to imitate, especially long sentences. It is difficult to imitate them completely. In addition, he knew the format and content of Russell's diary and what style the content would probably be, making it easier to distinguish. Zio took 3 of Russell's diaries and went to find Mr. A for appraisal. Mr. A looked at them briefly, selected one of them, and then looked past Zio and landed on Hasta. "Thank you for your generosity." Zio successfully obtained a free appraisal from Mr. A and walked back with brisk steps. "Pay it, my Lord Baron." Shu's tone was very pleasant. She only said a few words and got 50 gold pounds for free. It was a big profit for her. "Of course, this is the deal we agreed on." Hasta nodded with a smile, approving the deal. The reason why he was willing to pay a high price to buy Russell's diary at this stage was to prepare for the future. Because in the future, he would not join the Tarot Club. At that time, if he wanted to influence Klein and change some regrettable things, the only way was through Russell's diary. Klein collected Russell's diary through Audrey, the anti-political commissar, Furs and others, and he was the one who could provide Russell's diary stably. He could also write Chinese characters and knew many things. Although his handwriting was different from Russell's, he could completely regard his diary as a replica of Russell's diary. There was another advantage to doing this. Compared with direct contact with Klein, which would arouse his defense and vigilance, it was better to communicate through Russell's diary. Klein would definitely be more willing to believe Huang Dao, a fellow countryman in distress. And in these transactions, he could also recover the cost of buying the original manuscript of Russell's diary from Audrey, Furs and others. This is a business that is absolutely sure to make money. So now he wants to let Audrey, Furs, and Zio know that he has a hobby of collecting the original manuscripts of Russell's diary, and he also has many of them in his hands. In this way, when they need to trade with Mr. Fool, they will naturally think of him. The exchange session gradually came to an end. Mr. A wanted to complete the transaction with Asta alone, but this request was rejected by Asta. Mr. A did not force it too much, and asked someone to hand over the solid unicorn crystal of the Earth Rhinoceros to him, and Asta paid 300 gold pounds. Leaving the party cabin, the three returned to Viscount Grallant's villa. Facing Grallant's burning eyes, Asta could only say sorry that he really did not purchase the pharmacist potion formula at the extraordinary party tonight. It doesn't matter, I can wait. Grallant pretended to be relaxed. After chatting for a while, Asta paid Furs 50 gold pounds, took back a manuscript of Russell's diary, and ended the short gathering tonight. At 11:33, Hastur returned to his study, sat at the desk, and began to list the income and expenditure during this period. His main income came from three sources: 2,000 gold pounds borrowed from Viscount Glint, 800 gold pounds from selling the Barbarian potion formula, and a weekly salary of 10 gold pounds. There were many places for expenditure, such as purchasing extraordinary materials, purchasing Russell's diary, the wages of the housekeeper and maids, and daily living expenses. He picked up a pen and wrote and calculated on a piece of paper, and finally came to a conclusion. He had less than 800 pounds in his savings, and only 500 pounds was left in the bank. He still had more than 200 gold pounds on hand, and had already paid 500 gold pounds to support the salary and expenses for 2 or 3 months. With the current expenses and savings, without purchasing the extraordinary materials of the Sequence 7 briber, it can support until the plantation income in June. But he couldn't help but collect the extraordinary materials of the briber in advance, which was another huge expense. Alas, I still have to keep making money. I can consider making money after I'm promoted to Sequence 8 Barbarian. Now I'd better digest the lawyer potion. I don't know what kind of changes will happen to the Hall of Stars after I'm promoted to Sequence 8. Asta thought deeply for a long time, then took another piece of paper and continued to summarize what he had encountered during this period. The Lamp Goddess and the Fallen Mother Goddess, Andrew who blackmailed him but was not caught, Madame Germani who had recently calmed down, the poorhouse whose true and false situation had not yet been found out, and Mr. A who was very interested in him. These are all potential enemies that may cause trouble to him. He didn't plan to pay attention to the Fallen Mother Goddess now, and as for the Lamp Goddess, he would wait until he was promoted to Sequence 8 to see the situation. The fraudster Andrew can be offered a reward and let Zio help find a solution. Madame Germani, it's best to keep it like this. As for the poorhouse, because Professor Wayne had a deal with Vice Dean Bard, he didn't report it to the Church of the Goddess of Night. As long as he didn't go to the poorhouse again, there shouldn't be any trouble. As for Mr. A who was very interested in him, it was a bit of a headache. Who knows what those lunatics will do? Maybe they will come to my house at night to preach for the true Creator. He won't really find out my identity so quickly and come to my house, right? Asta subconsciously looked out the dark window, with a bad feeling in his heart. No, I always feel that this place is no longer safe. Asta frowned slightly, thinking that he needed to move to a new residence, preferably a place closer to the Church of the Goddess of Night. Only in this way can he feel safe. After tonight, find a reason to live in Queens for a while. After being promoted to Sequence 8 Barbarian, I should be able to have a certain ability to save my life. Asta made a decision in his heart. He sat and thought for a while before burning the paper full of words to ashes. Because of Mr. A, he was in a bad mood. Well, he couldn't let the lamp god live too comfortably. The next day, Asta went to Queens to find Greg after breakfast and said he wanted to stay with him for 2 or 3 nights. For this little thing, Greg agreed with a smile and said that he would stay here forever. After solving this little thing, Asta went to Backland University for classes. In the afternoon, he followed Lecturer Foran to Sherwood District to be a legal aid. When he was done with his busy schedule and left Sherwood District, Asta asked the carriage to bypass the court and opened the curtain to take a look at the court gate. This afternoon, he heard from a member of the Justice Research Association that an old man suddenly came to the court when it was about to close yesterday and wanted to confess his mistakes in the past. The old man told the judge and the jury a story that was moving and frightening at the same time. The court even closed its doors in advance because of this incident. As for how it was handled in the end, the member didn't know. According to his guess, the old man would not live long and might not even survive last night. Although he had expected this matter, Asta couldn't hide his sigh. If there is a chance in a few days, go to the small village where the old man lives in the suburbs to help him erect a monument. He was also a warrior who defended the kingdom of Lotm. Any warrior who fought selflessly for the country should not be forgotten like this. Thursday, April 6. After finishing the legal aid for half a day in the afternoon, Asta could clearly feel that the lawyer potion in his body had been completely digested. As long as he prepared the barbarian potion, he could be promoted to Sequence 8 barbarian. After leaving the Cherwood district, Asta did not return to Grek in Queens, but returned to his house where he had been away for 3 days. He moved all the materials needed for the barbarian formula to an empty room on the second floor and did not let anyone approach it. Extraordinary materials: 1 mad grass, a solid unicorn crystal of the earth rhinoceros. Auxiliary materials: 1 deep-grained walnut, 1 lemon balm, 10 milliliters of pure dew soaked in poplar bark, and 100 milliliters of strong liquor. Asta looked at all the collected materials and felt very satisfied and excited. After taking the potion, he will be a Sequence 8 barbarian, and his combat power will be greatly improved, which is definitely not comparable to a civil servant like a lawyer. After the excitement, Asta was a little embarrassed to pick up the deep-grained walnut, hold it in his palm and observe it for a while. This thing should be pitted, right? Or just crush it and take it with the pit inside. Asta looked at the formula again. It clearly stated 1 deep-grained walnut, which should be taken with the pit. Otherwise, it should be written as, how many grams of deep-grained walnut pulp. After figuring this out, Asta began to grind and mash various materials with the utensils prepared in advance, and finally added 100 milliliters of liquor. The final product was a small bowl of viscous liquid. Asta took a deep breath, and then endured the discomfort and drank the small bowl of viscous liquid in 1 gulp. It was very hot at the entrance, like swallowing a ball of charcoal, and there was a pain of burning from the mouth to the throat to the internal organs. The whole head was in severe pain, as if someone was pounding it with a pestle. There were bursts of screams in his ears, and every sound could tear the nerves and vibrate the eardrums. There were frequent illusions in front of him, as if the entire order of heaven and earth was collapsing, falling, and falling into an endless abyss. Based on his previous experience, Hasta tried his best to visualize the Hall of Stars and use it to suppress all the violent whispers from the barbarian potion. 10 or 20 minutes later, Hasta gradually regained his former sobriety. He was like a reborn person, with warm currents all over his body, and his fists gathered enough power to break the door with 1 punch. It was just that he was still a little uncomfortable because of his mental deficiency, which made his face pale slightly. He did not take a shower immediately, but sat on the bed with his eyes closed to rest for a long time, then got out of bed to move his limbs, silently feeling the new abilities brought by his promotion to barbarian. Barbarians represent terrible power, strong physique, and outstanding resistance to negative effects. When the law cannot be relied on to deal with the enemy, using force is a very reasonable way of persuasion. This is somewhat similar to Zio's performance. She is also good at relying on physical means to arbitrate others. There are 4 main abilities brought by the barbarian. Terrible power: your fists can easily defeat those who do not listen to your words. When order and rules are threatened, strength is the key to defending and reversing everything. Strong physique: you have a strong physique far beyond that of normal people. You are a barbarian, and a strong body is your biggest reliance for rushing and defeating the enemy. Resistance and weakening: a strong physique gives you extraordinary resistance. Any force that attempts to hurt you will be effectively blocked by a strong physique. You are naturally immune to attacks with negative effects, such as poisoning, curses, and illnesses. Blood roar: when you are threatened, your blood begins to boil, and your fighting spirit begins to condense. You can temporarily increase your strength several times, and at the same time, you can also send out a terrifying roar to deter the enemy. The first 3 abilities are easy to understand. They can all be classified as strong physical fitness. Strength and resistance are passive abilities after the body is strong. The 4th ability, Blood Roar, is an active skill, similar to Berserk, which can increase one's own ability several times and send out a roar-like mental shock, which can cause great harm to the enemy at a critical moment. Barbarian, will the Barbarian King use his ultimate skill? It doesn't seem so perverted. It's more like Zhang Fei in the 3 Kingdoms. It increases in size, speed and strength, and is immune to control. I just don't know if using this skill will empty my mind. Asta thought about it and felt that it shouldn't be. After all, this skill is called Blood Roar, not Savage Madness. He estimated that after using this skill, he would be in a very weak state. 3 seconds of real manliness. Well, it's a bit like that. Asta carefully felt the changes in every inch of his body in the room. He didn't leave the room until he got used to it and went to take a shower. After taking a shower, it was already past 7 o'clock in the evening. He enjoyed the late dinner. In order to make up for the consumption of his body's energy, his appetite seemed a bit large. Butler Neil, who was standing next to him, was a little scared, afraid that Asta's stomach would burst. Seeing Asta eating 2 more servings of pan-fried beef chops, Butler Neil whispered a reminder, overeating like this will easily overload your body and affect your health. Well, I exercised a little too much this afternoon, so I look a little hungry. Asta explained, then drank the last sip of the style drink from Daisy Bay before ending today's dinner. Around 10 o'clock, remember to send me a midnight snack, and it would be better if it's dessert. Asta got up and went upstairs. Butler Neil stared at his back in a daze, then looked at the empty table, with a very complicated expression, and finally came to a conclusion: maybe the Baron has been growing recently. Upstairs, in the bedroom, Asta set the alarm clock, and then fell asleep on the warm quilt. He learned from the last lesson and did not enter the Hall of Stars immediately, but first recovered his spirit and then entered the Hall of Stars. After sleeping until 10 o'clock, a maid had already brought him supper for the night. It was 2 desserts, caramel pudding and strawberry cake, with a cup of hot milk. Asta savored them slowly, thinking about how to treat the lamp god later. At about 10:30, Asta closed the door and locked the window, and entered the Hall of Stars. The starlight tonight was particularly bright, as if celebrating his successful promotion to Sequence 8. Asta sat down on his own high chair, stretched out his hand, and 2 chains of order fell in front of him at the same time. Yes, after he was promoted to Sequence 8, the Hall of Stars had another chain of order, and he could also write a rule that was beneficial to him on this new chain of order. Last time, he had already made a rule for himself to protect him in the long run. Now he needed a rule that could cooperate with his own abilities to exert powerful combat power. For example, the effect of Blood Roar could be enhanced several times or 10 times. But such a rough and simple rule could easily be exploited, and even if it could be enhanced so many times, his body would definitely not be able to withstand it and would be blown up by a force that far exceeded his body's load. For this, he has not yet decided what kind of rules to formulate. In addition to strengthening his own strength, he has another idea. Formulate a rule specifically suitable for the Hall of Stars. The Hall of Stars can bring the old and the outer gods to the gathering, and he has always been very tempted and cautious. So when he became a Sequence 9 lawyer, he did not immediately bring the lamp god and the fallen mother goddess trapped in the wishing lamp to the Hall of Stars. He was afraid that they would become the host. Although the rules of the Hall of Stars respect him and he is the master of this place, he still has some concerns. But he can't wait until he becomes a god to bring them to the Hall of Stars for a gathering, which would be meaningless and useless. According to his original idea, he would try to bring people in when he was promoted to Sequence 7 Briber. But after more than a month of whipping, he found that the lamp god had no ability to fight back against the Hall of Stars, and could only be furious every night. An outer god who once shone in the starry sky could not face such humiliating temptations without taking any action. It's not that the lamp goddess doesn't want to, but that he can't. He has no way or ability to threaten the Hall of Stars. This gave him the idea of bringing the lamp goddess to the Hall of Stars for a meeting first, so that he could understand the scope of the Hall of Stars' capabilities in advance. As for the fallen mother goddess, he didn't want to provoke her for the time being. After all, the fallen mother goddess was not sealed, and she was still one of the three pillars. Her strength was not comparable to that of the lamp goddess. At the same time, the fallen mother goddess was the one who had the greatest influence and interference in the world. Hastur was the most wary and cautious of her. If he wanted to bring her to a meeting, he had to wait until he was promoted to a sequence 4 demigod before considering it. While thinking, Hastur cast his eyes on the vast starry sky above his head. The stars were exceptionally bright. One of the stars reflected the same dazzling light as the lamp goddess and the fallen mother goddess. Which outer god and the old one would this be? With a thought, the vast starry sky moved closer, and the star shining with dazzling light enlarged in front of Hastur's eyes.